and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm, and I'm not wearing a jacket. It's too darn hot in New York.
And I'm Merryn Johnson. I'm not wearing a jacket either.
Welcome back, Merryn. You're halfway around the world now.
Yes, I went on an epic journey, but I'm back now, and I'm glad to be back in New York after Labor Day.
Well, let's talk about what's in the news. We're going to tell you about a win and a loss in Texas.
And of course, Disney is striking back against DeSantis, and neo-Nazis are marching at Disney World.
Scary. Nebraska's governor has issued an anti-trans executive order.
And a Catholic activist has pleaded guilty to threatening the HRC with violence and slaughter.
That's the Human Rights Campaign, not Hillary Clinton. 2 anti-LGBTQ school board members in Idaho were recalled by the voters.
And a very highly specialized gay doctor is fleeing the state of Louisiana with his family because he cannot take it anymore.
Right. The Philadelphia Gay News and their longtime reporter, Victoria Brownworth, are going to be honored for their 47 years of service.
And a gay pioneer is going to be inducted into the California Hall of Fame after many decades.
Who could it be? Football fans in the UK who chant anti-gay slogans at games now risk arrest.
And speaking of the footy, I'm going to report back to you about my adventures watching the Women's World Cup Down Under.
Yeah. House Republicans continue to work to sink the PEPFAR program that helps millions in Africa avoid AIDS or get treatment for it.
And we have a big coming out story, the actor playing the new Doctor Who.
Yeah, that's a big one. Okay, so we start in Texas, where federal district judge David Hittner, a Reagan appointee, he's not a young man, he stopped the state's ban on drag performers from going into effect last week. That's a win for the ACLU. The law bans sexually oriented performances in the presence of minors, a definition the ACLU said is, too broad and unconstitutional. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick there said that it was meant to push back against the radical left's disgusting drag performances. But Hittner will now try the case. He issued an injunction. Now he's going to try the case.
Yeah, I like that he found the plaintiff's arguments compelling because they were a mix of LGBTQ groups, businesses, and drag performers who basically told the court about the history and the significance to our community of drag as a form of performance art and self-expression. And he did seem sympathetic, so I'm hopeful, Andy.
Right. But the Texas Supreme Court reversed a lower court, good decision that we got, and is letting the ban on gender-affirming care for minors go into effect pending trial. Under that law, doctors who provide such care would have their medical licenses revoked. Insurance companies are barred from covering the care, so it denies parents the right to make healthcare decisions for their own kids. It bars new patients. Existing patients have to taper off their treatments.
Yes.
20 states have such bans. Several have been blocked by the courts, but the High Court of Texas is 100% Republican.
Yeah. The law is it's cruel, says the ACLU. Yes.
Yeah. So, and then in Nebraska, the governor there, Jim Pillen, Pillen, he signed an executive order. What he called a women's bill of rights, let's see if you agree, as if he cared about women's rights, that asserts a person's biological sex is defined at birth and is not subject to change in the eyes of the law. It's the same thing that Governor Stitt of Oklahoma did.
It is very disturbing because the executive order legally defines females and males on such narrow grounds. So females are, quote unquote, individuals whose biological reproductive system is designed to produce ova, and males as individuals, quote unquote, whose biological reproductive system is developed to fertilize the ova of the female. You can't even be a male or a female outside of those definitions, which might already exclude us, Andy, as I'm sitting here.
Well, sexuality, as the viewers of this show know, is a lot more complex than the governors of Nebraska and Oklahoma say. All right, let's go to Florida. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So Disney has now changed its legal strategy versus Governor DeSantis. The company has narrowed its suit to its First Amendment rights, since DeSantis retaliated against them for speaking out. And don't forget, Disney spoke out belatedly against the Don't Say Gay law, but they're being punished severely. But they're threatening new suits to gain access to public records of DeSantis. All the documents and communications, text messages with the keywords Disney or mouse.
It's a Pandora's box. DeSantis has opened a Pandora's box here, and I think he's on shaky ground now. He wants them to drop the lawsuit, but I don't think they will. They just need to refine it a little more. And they got a big case here. What about the neo-Nazis, though, turning up outside Disney World?
Yeah, before I go to, I just want to say I hope that this will embarrass DeSantis and his already foundering campaign for the Republican nomination for president. And another, before we get to the Nazis here, and they're also the DeSantis supporters. But DeSantis's redistricting plan, which he did himself to make sure Republicans controlled everything, was struck down as racist under the Florida Constitution, and it must be redrawn. So now we can talk about what happened with the Nazis.
Right. It seems like Orlando has been overrun by multiple groups of neo-Nazis. Some of their names, Aryan Freedom Defense Group and the Blood Tribe and the Goyim Defense League. I mean, the names.
Hold it on that. The Goyim Defense League. It sounds like something Mel Brooks would have in a movie.
Wouldn't it? And it would be funny. It would be funny.
It's sadly real.
So scary. Yeah, they've got their matching red shirts on. They're wearing their masks. There was video sent up to social media over the weekend with a black man shouting out, "Why y'all got those masks on?" calling out to the neo-Nazis. They basically just stood their ground in front of Disney World. Right. I mean, why? Protecting children.
They shout anti-Semitic slogans. They shout anti-gay slogans. Mm-hmm. They say Jews will not replace us. Right. They accuse Jews of usury, pedophilia, and pornography.
Yeah.
But they are aiding DeSantis' quest for a white Christian non-LGBTQ nation. 50 of them had a march of the red shirts, the brown shirts under Hitler, in Orlando, waving those swastika flags. Where is DeSantis and the rest of the Republican Party coming out and saying, this is totally unacceptable, horrible, must be condemned? But he doesn't do it because it's part of his base.
Right. You look at a drag show and then you look at that and you tell me which one is a problem.
Exactly. But that's what we're living through in our divided nation. All right. I'm going to move over to North Central California. A school district has agreed to pay, this is not a win for us, but it's not an admission of guilt. They agreed to pay $100,000 to settle a lawsuit brought by a mother who claimed that school officials convinced her child to identify as bisexual and transgender and concealed the information from her, the mother. So the Spreckles School Union School District denies any wrongdoing, and the judge dismissed the suit without prejudice.
Yeah.
What happened? The kid went to a meeting of the Equality Club, which is the LGBTQ club for LGBT kids and allied kids. And the mom claimed identities were pushed on members. And when her kid went to counseling about depression, the mom said her kid was advised that her problems were due to her not being who she was. Of course, every counselor says, you got to be who you are. Sounds like, it's really tempting when she gets this $100,000 settlement to tempt parents across the country to start suing, if they don't like the fact that their kid is gay.
Well, it's when you read about the case, it seems awfully murky to the point where in the judgment, they're not even laying any wrongdoing at the school. It just seems that the woman is very aggrieved. I don't know when you're dealing with adolescents where you can trace depression or anxiety or problems too. It could be a multitude of things. But she has blamed this equality club, nothing that's happening at home, nothing that's happening with the young person's hormones or identity or mental health. And I think $100,000, the school is probably saying, oh, well, that'll hopefully make it go away.
I read a story in the New York Times today about teachers in South Korea who are fed up with all the complaints from the students and the parents, and they're saying we're not being able to do our jobs. And that's, of course, what's happening here as well. Now, look, we welcome a certain amount of parental input into children's education, and they're the teachers as well. And of course, this has become a big issue for the Republicans. But you got to give teachers some latitude, or they're not going to want to be in that profession, which seems to be the goal. Mm-hmm. All right, I want to talk about that poll that came out from Arizona State, Stanford, yes. University of Houston. You want to talk about it? Or?
I do. Let me just find that bit. I mean, I guess the basic feeling generally is that amongst young people, there is going to be a more acceptance of transgender equal rights, but a new survey has basically found out that is not true. Students from 3 states, Arizona, California, and Texas, were asked to respond in this survey to the 3 big questions about transgender legislation and policies. The major issues being bathroom choice, transgender women's access to sports, and whether or not gender-affirming care, including puberty blockers, should be supplied to people under 18.
Let me ask you a question. Maybe I misread it. And this was just surveying students?
I believe it was students in colleges across those 3 states. And the survey was 2023 Transgender Legislation and Policies. That's the name of it.
So we didn't do well. I mean, we do better in California than we do in Texas and Arizona, but we didn't do well on a lot of these issues. Now, the right wing has been hammering these issues for a long time and spreading a lot of misinformation. But I think we have to concede that we're losing the messaging battle on a lot of these things.
Well, I think in colleges also there's already a lot of anxiety around gender and around who has access to certain spaces. It's already a competitive environment. It's already an overpriced environment where people are paying premium to even get a college education. So I'm not sure this would be the greatest groups to ask, especially in those states. But
yeah. I mean, we assume young people are going to be pretty liberal about most things. But I mean, I used to, with Ann, I used to work at the Hedford Martin Institute. I mean, we would talk to the kids about some current events and things like that, and they could take some surprisingly conservative views about some things in the world. So, yeah. Anyway, all right. Okay, I want to go to Idaho. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a happy story. This is in West Bonner County. 2 leading right-wing members of the school board were recalled, a repudiation of their far-right politics in rural North Idaho. More than 60% voted to recall the chair, Keith Rutledge, the vice chair, Susan Brown, shifting the board to a moderate majority. The future of the right-wing superintendent, a guy named Brandon Durst, is now uncertain. He supports funding religious schools. This is superintendent of the public schools. He supports funding religious schools and banning gay pride flags statewide. So it's a very conservative area that overwhelmingly voted for Trump in 2020, but the school board members were too much, even for them. This guy Durst needs a waiver to continue in his job, so most are hoping that he will not get it.
A lot of the complaint is really centered on the fact that this conservative fear of pulling curriculum and pulling materials associated with the curriculum is costing the district money, and it really buggering up the teaching. So yeah, good for them. Now,
I hope this doesn't throw our director too much off, but maybe we should talk about the Katy School District, which has halted all access to books before the school year begins, based on a complaint from one trustee, Morgan Calhoun, I guess, who said she'd seen books in elementary schools that support sexually alternative lifestyles, and she based it on a book titled Itty Bitty Kitty Corn, about a fluffy pink kitten that wants to be a unicorn, which she says was written to turn kids transgender. Now,
I don't mean to laugh, but it's hilarious if it wasn't so tragic. I mean, we're talking about a book which is very much like many children's books that help children look at the issue of their true selves, their authentic selves, the range of identities, by imagining being some other kind of creature. In fact, there's another book called The Pony Who Wishes That It Was a Unicorn, which looks at a similar kind of thing. I would like to ask the right wing, how is this sexually explicit material? Because that's actually the phrase they use, sexually explicit books.
Yes, but based on this nonsense, all books must now be reviewed and reassessed before kids can read any books. Of course, they don't want kids reading books. They have to be reviewed by people who obviously don't know how to read, essentially. But as I say, kids, it's all on the internet. If you can't get the books, almost all the material that you want to read is on the internet.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Colorado, to Douglas County. 70 men interrupted the Douglas County Pride Fest family-friendly drag show last week. Now, there they are. They stood in front of the stage wearing T-shirts reading, "Stand to Protect Children," blocking the view of the performers for 40 minutes before the police finally escorted them out. Among them were members of a tactical training group called Able Shepherd that partners with the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office, training that has now been discontinued due to their bigotry, at least for now. So that's positive development, but God, they're shameless.
And I don't know what they achieved. All they did was held up a show for 45 minutes that everybody there wanted to see.
Right. This story is a little arcane. The disciplinary board of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, it prohibits attorneys from engaging in intentional harassment or discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity and other categories. So an attorney named Zachary Greenberg says, well, that infringes on my free speech, to call people names. So a lower court, Trump-appointed judge, agreed with him. But a 3-judge panel of the Federal Appeals Court said that he lacked standing to sue over the revised rule, as it only applies to attorneys who are practically certain they are causing harassment or discrimination. So the new rule prohibits biased conduct rather than unpopular speech. But the Trump judge, Chad Kenney, struck it down again, only to be overruled again by the 3-judge panel. It's a little bit like a tennis game here. Okay. Can we talk about politics a little bit and what's going on with the presidential race?
Yeah. Well, what are you thinking?
Well, I wanted to bring up Nikki Haley because she keeps hammering Biden about his age and Trump about his age, and she wants mental competency tests. First, she said for people over 75. Now she wants a mental competency test for everybody. I don't know how well she would do, or anybody who's crazy enough to run for president. But so she says all these things, and it would be a quick way of getting rid of George Santos if they had a competency test. Although I read that George is looking into a plea deal, and I hope that will remove him from Congress.
Yes,
he's on trial.
I think so. one of my problems with Nikki Haley, one of my many problems with her, is her lack of consistency. And that one thing she says screams at the other. Like she did flip out about Mitch McConnell freezing for 30 seconds the other day. She's flipped out about 90-year-old Senator Dianne Feinstein, of course, and now she's saying we need age barriers. We need Congress people to be of a certain age and not be allowed to, stay there indefinitely. But on the other hand, she said she wanted to raise the retirement age for anybody who's now in their 20s.
Well past, 70 or wherever. It's just totally inconsistent. Give us a break. We want to retire. But now, and let's talk about Tim Scott, the South Carolina senator, where South Carolina has two bachelor senators, Lindsey Graham and Tim Scott. So apparently Republican donors are wary of him. He's 57. He's never been married. He says he has a girlfriend, but he keeps her identity private. And he says half of Americans are single. That's not true. It's more like 30%. And the U.S. has not elected a bachelor president since Grover Cleveland in 1884. And he married, while he was in the White House, he married his ward. And of course,
39 years, yeah.
The only totally single president was James Buchanan, and right before Lincoln, who was apparently homosexual himself. So anyway, but it's interesting that they're going after, of course, they're going after Tim Scott for this, and of course he's totally anti-gay, and he says, "Oh, I'm not married. You're going to make that an issue in 2023? What is this, 1963?" Well, you're trying to turn the clock back on a lot of issues too, Senator Scott.
Well, Axios says that he's going to address the issue in the coming weeks. So I'll be interested to hear what he does say.
Going to have a shotgun wedding? Or whatever. Oh, well, I remember, of course, you weren't around here, but Ed Koch, when he ran the bachelor mayor, who was homosexual, who was hiding it. And he used to go around with, Miss America, Bess Meyerson, a former Miss America, Bess Meyerson. And in the campaign, he held hands with her, and everybody was laughing at it. But he felt that he had to do this to be acceptable to the voters and pretend that he was heterosexual. Senator Barbara Mikulski of Maryland used to pretend that she was heterosexual. She wasn't. It's degrading. It's stupid. I mean, I understand why people do it. And the sad thing is that the voters, in those days, if you were gay, they wanted you to be in the closet because their goal was to keep you in the closet. And folks, they're trying to put us back in the closet, but we ain't going. All right, in Virginia, out-trans state delegate Danica Rome, her Republican opponent, Bill Wolf, he's making his opposition to trans rights a major campaign issue. She's transgender, and pushing a bill to require school staff to expose trans students to their parents. Now, it's very close to Virginia. Virginia, you're one of the few states that's got elections this fall for your state legislature. The Virginia House is 51-46 Republican, and the Senate is 21-19 Democrat. And Governor Youngkin, the smiling fascist, is working hard to win both houses so he can put his programs through. But we're relying on you, Virginia, to stand up. All right. Hey, here's a disturbing story I just read not too long before we went on the air. Apparently, they have state libraries in Montana, Missouri, and Texas, and they are now leaving the American Library Association over its opposition to banning books. They don't like, because they want to ban books with racial or LGBTQ themes. And Republican legislatures in other states want to do the same. Arizona, Georgia, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, South Dakota, and Wyoming. Now, the ALA, the American Library Association, denies that there's been a mass exodus, but individual membership is down 14% since 2018. Again, remember, kids, when you can't get a book in your library, there are places like the Brooklyn Public Library online that will make banned books available to you nationwide with access.
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk about this guy, Adam Natina. You have that story?
Oh, the terrible Catholic so-called activist. I don't know that we can define him as such, but he's pled guilty now to threatening the human rights campaign with violence, and not just the HRC, our whole community. He mentioned that he would slaughter, there would be a bullet for all of us. I mean, the most violent language he left in, I believe, 2 phone call recordings, 2 voicemails to the HRC. He's 34 years of age, Adam Michael Natina of West Friendship, Maryland. He's pleaded guilty in U.S. District Court in Baltimore to this. It's a federal crime, using a telephone to threaten our premier LGBTQ advocacy group. I believe with this plea deal, he will still get possibly 5 years. I think.
He did this after the mass shooting at the Covenant School in Tennessee, which was allegedly by a former trans student. And then he said, you want a war? We'll effing slaughter you back. We will slit your throats. We're going to kill you 10 times more in full. This is rather strong language. This is putting him in trouble. So it was the Justice Department that prosecuted him. He'd been posting anti-LGBT articles at something called Catholic Vote since 2016. They have now been removed by that group's website. All right. Alabama's Attorney General, Steve Marshall, says he can prosecute people who help women travel out of state to obtain abortions as part of a criminal conspiracy. Texas made it illegal to transport anyone on roads within a city or county to get an abortion, hoping to block Texas women from getting to the airport to get on a plane to go elsewhere. And they call that abortion trafficking. It's all reminiscent, without exaggeration, I say this, of the fugitive slave laws. Congress passed that to try to hold the Union together, saying, okay, your slaves ran away. You can come up here and get them. We'll turn them back. That was part of the Compromise of 1850, legalizing abduction of escaped slaves, but of course, and punishing anyone who helped a runaway slave with 6 months in prison and a $1,000 fine, which was about 3 years worth of income in those days. But again, what did it lead to? A witch hunt. You could have just gone up through the north and said, that one, he escaped from us. How do you prove that? And
right.
You end up you saw 12 years a slave. That's the kind of stuff that happened. So
right. I mean, this concept of making women now in America almost fugitives of the state, it's really quite terrifying. And the language here, it surprised me. These would be conspiracy charges. I don't know if you mentioned that, but this shocked me. Marshall wrote, an elective abortion performed in Alabama would be a criminal offense. Thus, a conspiracy formed in the state to have that same act performed outside the state is illegal. I mean, wow. That's
And Alabama's totally contemptuous of drawing its lines fairly, and they've again been overruled by a federal judge, and they keep appealing. They want to have these districts that keep blacks out of their legislatures and out of their congressional delegation. All right, in Texas, the state Senate trial of the virulently anti-LGBTQ impeached Attorney General Ken Paxton is underway. And it's encouraging at the start. They need 2/3 of these senators to convict him. He was overwhelmingly impeached by the House, 121 to 23, with a lot of Republican votes in May. So, but far-right millionaires led by Steve Bannon are running ads statewide to try to win him an acquittal. But the votes they've taken so far, they tried to dismiss the charges at the outset, are encouraging, because we're getting enough Republican votes to convict him. Not sure how it's going to turn out. Support for impeachment is coming from more traditional Republican conservatives like George W. Bush, Karl Rove, and former Governor Rick Perry, not liberals.
No, I can't see him getting acquitted of all 16 counts. Can you imagine that? That would make it a mockery, I think.
Well, you just need one to keep him out of office.
Yeah, exactly.
So that would be nice. You want talk about the situation in Louisiana?
Well, I mean, we saw that Louisiana or Mississippi.
Well, you can talk about Mississippi if you like, but I'm talking about the pediatrician.
Oh, yes, but both of those states. All right, yes, this was something that really did bother me, and I think it's going to be something that the GOP have to understand, that these states are going to have brain drains, effectively. People are going to, highly qualified people who are LGBTQ or allies are going to leave the states. So it's happening in Louisiana. A gay doctor with a young family, 2 kids and a husband. He has a very important specialty, which is he's a pediatric cardiologist, and there were only 2 in the whole state. He had very high hopes. Jake Klein-Mahan and his husband Tom, they moved to New Orleans in 2018 with plans to stay there and raise their children because he had graduated from Tulane University. So he did feel a connection to the state. However, with these laws coming in, he just doesn't feel comfortable, and he doesn't feel that he can raise his children with the right atmosphere. What does he say here? He started this, he accepted this job at a local children's hospital as director of the pediatric heart transplant program, so that young people in the state didn't have to travel outside the state for treatment. And he says at the time there was only 1 heart transplant doctor in the state of Louisiana. I believe the kids in Louisiana should have the same world-class health care as any other part of the United States. But this is obviously not going to happen. He's moving to New York, where he's
Long Island. He's moving to Long Island, my suburban homeland out there to the east here. And let's see. He started receiving a lot of hate mail on his job.
Yeah, did he?
Because he spoke out at a hearing against this legislation. So he started getting hate mail on his job, which condemned him for being gay and telling him he needed to find Jesus. Now he needs to get the hell out of the state, and he is.
Yes, me leaving is going to leave somewhat of a hole for medical care, he told a local news affiliate. Maybe they'll just pray for their children, but it's just, I think, sign of things to come.
Right. Well, my late sister went in for medical care when she lived in Texas, and before the operation or something, the doctor said, "Can we pray with you?" She said, "Please, just do your jobs." Leave that. This isn't a public hospital.
Yes,
but that's the culture there. All right, let's talk about some good news. Let's talk about your friend and colleague, Victoria Brownworth. Tell us what's going on.
Yes, well, Victoria, I mean, she's probably one of the journalists that I've worked with most consistently. I started working with her in 2010 at Curve magazine, where I very quickly made her senior politics editor because no one knows more about our political struggles than she does. And I'm very pleased to say that this year she won the NLGJA Sarah Pettit Memorial Award for...
That's the National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association.
Yes, she's Journalist of the Year. That's a very weighty award. It's a very, and I feel nostalgic about it because Sarah Pettit was, as you must know, Andy, of course, trailblazing lesbian editor who died far too young. And Victoria actually worked with Pettit at Outweek magazine in New York in the late 80s and early 90s up until the magazine closed. She later worked for Sarah at Out magazine when she was editor-in-chief there. But basically, Victoria's written for, every LGBT publication I can think of. She's written numerous novels. She's run a small publishing house. She writes for me over at Queer 40. She writes for the Curve Foundation. And over at the Curve Foundation, she also won this year the Curve Foundation Inaugural Award for Excellence in Lesbian Coverage. So I know that everybody, including Philadelphia Gay News, is very proud to have Victoria on staff. She's simply the best.
And she wrote for the Philadelphia Inquirer. She also published for the Philadelphia Gay News a series of stories on the wrongful detention of Brittany Griner in Russia, which drew a lot of attention to that. She, as a young woman, she was expelled from the Philadelphia High School for Girls in the 1970s for being a lesbian and subjected to conversion therapy at a psychiatric ward for teens. So she has suffered for her art, for sure.
There's no one like her that doesn't. She really does walk the talk. She really does live to write, live to make deadline, and she's one of our great journalists. And I hope there's a new generation coming up underneath her that can look to her work and carry on that carry the torch for us, because Journal of Record, that's what she does best.
Yes. And the Philadelphia Gay News itself, which was founded by activist Mark Siegel back in 1976, we have a picture of him, is the recipient of the NLGJA's Legacy Award, cited for their fearless approach and amplification of underrepresented voices. This paper, through Mark's leadership, has published 2,250 issues, employed 295 people, and won a slew of awards over the years. So they've really done a great job there in Philadelphia. Congratulations to them.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about some of the people we lost. I do want to pay tribute to Bill Richardson, who was the former UN ambassador, the former governor of New Mexico, a Congress member, but also our greatest freelance hostage negotiator, and this year playing a key role in freeing Brittany Griner from a Russian prison. He was only 75. As the governor of New Mexico from 2003 to 2011, he added sexual orientation and gender identity to the state's protected categories, though he did not support same-sex marriage at first, like a lot of Democrats back then, and almost all Republicans. And in Congress, he supported the federal gay rights bill. But he did institute domestic partner benefits in New Mexico. And in 2007, he was the keynote at the Human Rights Campaign Fund dinner. So we lost an ally and somebody who really led an amazing life, especially getting those hostages out all over the world.
Absolutely. And on a more local note, we lost Ken Keachel, a lawyer who was the first openly gay person to serve on the Broward County Commission his last year as mayor. He died on Friday of pancreatic cancer. He was only 60. He was a Democratic activist and had his own law practice, and he was a very committed activist in the county. He was elected in 2006 and served until 2010. And his victory at that time was very meaningful because he beat out the incumbent Republican, James Scott, who I think he'd been appointed to the county commission by Jeb Bush. So, a lot of people in Florida are paying tribute to him. I think Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz wrote on Twitter that she was heartbroken to hear of the passing of her friend. He spent his career fighting for LGBTQ and human rights. May his memory be a blessing.
Yes, he lost his husband, Ted Adcock, last year. He also he had a law firm that specialized in civil issues for LGBTQ clients in Wilton Manors, which is a very gay town there in Florida.
Yes.
All right. In Wyoming, there were 6 sorority sisters. Do you want to talk about this?
It almost sounds like setting up for a joke. 6 sorority sisters walk into a bar. Look, yes, in a university in Wyoming, some sorority sisters have lost a lawsuit over the admission of a trans woman to their sorority. The judge dismissed the lawsuit contesting this woman's admission into the sorority at the University of Wyoming because he said he could not override how the private voluntary organization defined a woman in order that she didn't belong. So 6 members of Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority challenged Artemis Langford's admission by casting doubt on whether sorority rules allowed a transgender woman. And the problem is sorority bylaws don't define who is a woman. And a federal court cannot interfere with the sorority chapter's freedom of association by ruling against its vote to induct this woman. Apparently, it's come out that the women's lawsuit was based on a drunken rumor that Artemis was a sexual predator. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, I mean, it was that the judge said, look, there's no legal basis for your suit. It's full of personal smears, not legal language. And P.S., the Kappa Gamma is based in Ohio. So if you want to sue, you got to go there.
What a mess.
All right. In California, this is somebody we all should know from our history, Jose Soria. Jose was the first out gay candidate for public office in the United States. He ran for the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco in 1961 and got 6,000 votes. So he's being inducted into the California Hall of Fame. He was a World War II vet. He was a celebrated drag performer at the Black Cat Cafe, and he co-founded the League for Civil Education to encourage gay participation in public life, and the Tavern Guild to fight back against police raids of gay bars. This is another thing. He established the Imperial Court of San Francisco in 1965 to raise money for gay and non-gay charities. That is still going, and he started it.
It's incredible. And they were pivotal years, the early 60s. I know we talk about Stonewall, but people often forget the early 60s was when many of these groups were really on the move and really starting to percolate. This award is obviously going to be awarded posthumously. Soria died of adrenal cancer in 2013 at his home in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
In California, also, we told you about the Chino School Board that is being sued by the state attorney general for its anti-LGBTQ antics. Now we learn that the Christian nationalist leader of a megachurch is the one behind the election of 3 of the 5 school board members. One, Sonia Shaw, the board president, says she wants to be a God-fearing example to the nation. You, Satan, are losing. She told an assembly. The Calvary Chapel megachurch collects thousands of ballots for state and local candidates. So they're into power, and they get endorsed by this pastor, Pastor Hibbs. And what are we doing to match this? Anyway, Hibbs called transgenderism, his word, a sexually perverted cult of Satan. There's that word again.
Oh, dear.
All right. Now talk about Mississippi.
Oh, let me scroll up. Yes, Fabian Nelson. So we all probably know this by now, but he won a Democratic primary runoff on Tuesday in a blue district, no less. He is Mississippi's first openly LGBTQ lawmaker. And he talked to the New York Times. They ran a really nice interview with him so that we got to find out a little bit more about him. Mm-hmm. I did know that he's a foster dad of 2 kids. What I didn't know is that he actually comes from a family of firsts. His parents were very active in the region, in the community. I think his grandmother was the first ever Black nurse. And so he grew up believing that he could make a difference. And he didn't necessarily lead his campaign with the idea of being the first out LGBTQ lawmaker in Mississippi. He really led with the idea of cleaning up District 66, which is, full of crime and poverty and lacks economic infrastructure so that people can help themselves and do better. That is his main concern.
And as we note, he's just been nominated, but the fact is, he does not have a Republican opponent, so he can't lose unless there's a Biden campaign against him. And, he said, look, and as you said, he didn't lead with the gay stuff, but he said it's important to have a seat at the table because, and it's a famous expression, you don't have a seat at the table, you are what's for lunch.
Yeah, I love that.
All right. Okay, so now the only state without an LGBTQ legislator is Louisiana.
Yep.
All right. In Tennessee, there was a district attorney threatening to prosecute anyone defying the state's ban on drag performers. And his statement that he was going to do that doubled the attendance at the Blount Pride Fest. The federal judge declared the law unconstitutional, but Blount County's DA argued, well, that only applies to that county. It doesn't apply to our county. This is a federal judge. It's ridiculous. So the organizers of the Pride thing had to go to another federal judge to get an injunction to stop the DA from interfering with their thing. But it doubled their attendance. And it's so encouraging to hear this, right? That we're turning out in great, you want to go up against us, we're going to come out in greater numbers. We're not going to hide. And they had a drag story hour. They did all that kind of thing. And Zoe Zephyr showed up from Montana to come to this when she heard that the DA was giving them a hard time.
Yeah.
In Essex, Iowa, an LGBTQ group was barred from the Labor Day parade by the anti-gay mayor, who forbade sexual orientation agendas. So the parade organizers didn't. The parade organizers wanted to let them march. They approved Shenandoah Pride, but they didn't. They just set up a booth at the thing. So at least they set up a booth, but they were being threatened. In Texas, I've got to watch our time. I think I'll skip that. There's all those age verification. I just want to say those age verification laws are being struck down. So
yes,
keep kids away. Let's just do that.
The only thing I had left for national was Brandon Wolf of Equality Florida becoming national press secretary for the HRC.
Have you ever heard this guy? He's terrific on television.
Yes, and talk about a baptism of fire. You might remember he of course is an LGBTQ activist, gun control advocate, and a survivor of the Pulse nightclub mass shooting in 2016, which really spurred him to become involved in policy. That's how he took that job at Equality Florida and testified to Congress about his experience as a survivor of that massacre, and then he wrote a memoir about it. So I figure if anyone is qualified to speak about the pressing issues of our community, it is Brandon Wolf.
So he worked for Equality Florida, and he was always taking on Ron DeSantis and his stuff, and he's been terrific as a spokesperson. So at least they recognize talent there at HRC. All right, international news?
Yes.
Okay. Do you want to start with the World Cup?
Oh, well, yeah, I shouldn't I? Because I'm such an international woman of mystery. Well, I was really lucky because, you're not here from my accent. I'm from Australia, and Destination New South Wales, which is, New South Wales being my home state, of course, was hosting this year's FIFA Women's World Cup. And they flew me down just to soak up the atmosphere and the culture and to actually attend a big grand finale. And of course, in my fantasy, it was going to be the Matildas playing US team, but that didn't happen. Nevertheless, it was good to see the Brits and the Spain and then Spain really face off. And what I did see, a couple of things anecdotally was, the crowd was very, very split male, female, but it was so heartening to see men, Aussie men and families come out with their kids to really support, as we call them, the girls. And it felt to me that women's sports really got a shot of visibility through this event. And, Spain winning was terrific because the women played, that magical game where they all worked in unison as a well-oiled machine to really pull off that victory 1-0. But of course, it was marred by what's happened with the coach. And it feels very much still, in spite of it being the gayest World Cup ever. And these women are role models of athletic excellence and authenticity. There still seems to me to be this underlying sexism in the sport where something can happen like, Jenny Hermosa gets kissed on the lips when she didn't want to. And we don't know what her sexuality is. I think she was very much rumoured to be gay and to be dating a Catalonian player. But Andy, what do you think?
It's encouraging to see they're finally going to get a woman coach for the Spanish team, for the women's team.
And I think they need one. I think they really need one. I mean, now Jorge Vilda has been fired partly for supporting Louis Rubiales' kiss. But I just kept thinking, can you imagine if there had been a female coach of the English team who ran up and kissed David Beckham on the lips while the royal family was watching? No, you can't. Because guess what? It would never happen because it would never be acceptable.
Right. Well, welcome back, and thanks for that report.
Thank you.
And tell us also about the Irish singer
Roisin. Yes. So while we're in the land of the other land of things, yes. So the singer Roslyn Murphy, who you might know as one half of the electronic duo Moloko, who had a very big, might I remind people, LGBTQ fan base. She is not LGBTQ. She's a straight ally, but she's gotten into hot water recently because one of her old Facebook comments was unearthed and posted on Twitter or X, in which she rails against puberty blockers and really puts her nose into some business that isn't hers. She said, "Please don't call me a TERF. Please don't keep using that word against women. I beg you. But puberty blockers are FUCKED, absolutely desolate, big pharma laughing all the way to the bank. Little mixed up kids are vulnerable and need to be protected. That's just true." So she's now had to issue a long-winded apology on Twitter. Not many people are buying it, of course. It's kind of a I apologize, but I don't apologize kind of thing. But she is very sorry, and she does admit that she's gotten into the center of a storm and offended many of her fans in our community.
And let's talk about the biggest coming out of the week. And
yes. Ncuti Gatwa, the gorgeous man who is the latest actor to be cast as the Doctor in Doctor Who, has come out as queer in Elle magazine. And he's done this after kind of dodging it in a previous British Vogue's Pride issue. He was included, but he didn't come out and say anything. But this time he really has said it. And I think it makes a big difference. He shared an anecdote about going to Manchester Pride, shaking my cha-chas. He sounds like a lot of fun.
And he played a gay teen on the series Sex Education, but he's going to make TV history as the first Black Doctor Who. Doctor Who is a big deal worldwide.
Absolutely.
All right. The UN Human Rights Council is continuing the post of independent expert on sexual orientation and gender identity issues. They're appointing Graeme Reed of South Africa, as he works for Human Rights Watch now, to succeed Victor Madrigal-Borloo. Reed is also a lecturer at Yale, and he has written about gay identities in small towns in South Africa and co-founded the Gay and Lesbian Archives of South Africa. It was nice to see the Pope causing a stir by going after the reactionary Catholic Church in the United States. And he says where they replace ideologies, where ideologies are replacing faith. But, it's not like he's the most liberal guy in the world, the Pope, but he's after the Catholic Church in America. So he was confronted about this on the plane home from a trip to, where was he? Mongolia. Right. And the reporters asked him about it. He said, he says they need to get over it. They're mad, get over it.
He's onto something, though, isn't he? I mean, faith in this country is being used to support ideologies. It's really sad, because I do believe that you should be able to have a faith if you want to.
Yeah. It would also be nice that the church, of course, accepted gay people and let women be priests and all those other things. All right. In the United Kingdom, the police are investigating abusive homophobic chants at football games at against the Chelsea Football Club. There's a long-standing tradition of chanting "Chelsea Rent Boy" as a slur against them, but they now prosecute this. They send people into the stands and say, "You get out. We're not tolerating this anymore." And they arrest people, and they're subject to criminal prosecution. You couldn't do that with free speech. But an opposing club was fined £100,000 for failing to contain the chant. So football over there is working on this, at least.
Yeah, and I was very proud of my hometown. There was everyone in the stands at the stadium was so well behaved. Nobody was, resorting to that kind of behavior at all. But I did see some people kissing on the lips, so maybe it was just, but that's sort of those sorts of slurs and chants and anger and competitiveness. I didn't see anything like it.
All right, we're down to our last 4 minutes. Nigeria, more than 60 people were arrested. We told you in connection with an alleged gay wedding last week. They've been remanded to prison for at least 2 weeks. The hearing is September 18th. The defense is seeking bail. They face prison sentences for allegedly going to a gay wedding of up to 14 years. The men said it was a fashion show.
It's shocking.
In Hong Kong, a top court told the government to create a legal recognition for same-sex partnerships, not marriage, but that's a big step there. And in Bulgaria, the European court ruled that Bulgaria violated the rights of a same-sex couple who had married abroad by not recognizing their marriage, and they have to give them some rights as well.
Yes, it's the same theme, isn't it? These states need to offer some kind of framework.
Yeah. All right, AIDS news. Again, the federal PEPFAR program is under attack by Republicans. It works to contain AIDS in African nations, 15 of them. Republicans say it's encouraging abortion in some way, and of course it doesn't. And the program was developed by George W. Bush, for God's sakes. And so if it goes out of existence, they care about human life. It's going to kill an awful lot of people. And there was we better go to, I'm going to skip that. We better go to entertainment news.
Oh, yes, should we start with Christian Cooper, the lovely Chris Cooper, who's got a special appearance at National Arts Club in New York here?
Yes, Chris is, and he's going to be co-hosting next week while Anna's also away then. But if you can see him in person at the National Arts Club right there in Gramercy Park, talking about his memoir, Better Living Through Birding, go to nationalartsclub.org for ticket information. It's free, but you're supposed to register. Let's talk about the films that are going to be streaming this week.
I'm very excited to see Cassandro because I've always had a little bit of a crush on Gael Garcia Bernal, and he plays Saul Armendariz, this exotico wrestler who was flaming out gay in the 1980s in Juarez in Mexico. I have got to see this film. It's on select theaters September the 15th, and then it goes to Prime Video on September the 22nd.
And a secret love about Terry Donahue of the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League and her lifelong love, Pat Henschel. They kept their secret love for 60 years. Well, that's streaming on Netflix now. And of course, you ever saw League of Their Own, it's based on these characters. And Circus of Books about West Hollywood's mom and pop adult bookstore run by a conservative couple is also on Netflix. And we want to just tell you about a conference coming up and an expo on men having babies in New York. Not having the babies in New York, but just men having babies. September 29th to October 1st at the Times Square Westin Hotel. Go to menhavingbabies.org/New York for more information. And there we are. It's been great being with you, Merryn.
It's been great being with you. We've had so much fun. And I feel like we're heading into the new season. Lots of new shows, new plays, new books all coming out. Lots of it we'll talk about, I hope.
Yes. And what else are you looking forward to besides getting out of this heat?
Well, tonight I'm going to a little preview of Hulu's Never Let Him Go, which we've talked about. That's going to be coming out soon about the American academic that was pushed off a cliff in a homophobic hate crime in Australia in the 1980s.
I'm seeing that Thursday night. So, yeah. Okay, we're out of time.
Okay, see you next time.